Before we begin today's episode, we pause to honor the brave men and women who have served and continue to serve our country in times of war, peacekeeping, and humanitarian missions. On this Remembrance Day, we remember their sacrifices, their courage, and the legacy they've left behind. May we carry forward their commitment to justice, dignity, and peace in all that we do.
This is Iris Lloyd, president of CUPE New Brunswick, and you are listening to CUPE Talks in the Maritimes with Nick and Chris.
Do you have any takeaways that you're going to be taking from the courses that you've learned so far?
Yes. So I've done a lot of the single day training courses through CUPE already. And one of the most valuable things is speaking and discussing events and experiences with the other participants.
And I would love to see more members get involved with anything, whether it's start out on a small committee. We want to see,
Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned here this week?
It's a great learning experience, and as long as I've been around and involved, I'm still learning.
I am Nicholas London, co-host of CUPE Talk in the Maritimes.
I'm Chris Watson, president of the New Brunswick Federation of Labor and co-host of CUPE Talk in the Maritimes.
Hi, my name is Brian Watson, former president of CUPE New Brunswick and now the producer of CUPE Talk in the Maritimes and across Canada.
Wes Wills, Local 380 Vice President.
Hey, this is Justin Spooner, Region DVP and First Vice President of CUPE 1253.
I'm Shelby Dodge, President of Local 3226.
Karen Tier, President of the New Brunswick Council of Nursing Home Unions.
I'm Jamie Agnew, and I'm the President of CUPE Local 963, representing New Brunswick Liquor Store, Retail, and Warehouse Workers.
I'm Sherry Hillier, President of CUPE Newfoundland and Labrador, and General Vice President for the Atlantic Maritimes.
I'm Cheryl Ann Keown, and I'm the Healthcare Council President, PEI, and I also sit on Local 805.
Quay, hello. This is Kathy Johnson, President of CUPE 5446.
Hi, my name is Dorinda Smith. I'm from Local 813.
I'm Teresa McAllister, Provincial President of CUPE 2745 Educational Support Staff.
Bonjour, ici Alain Soucy, membre du SCFP, Syndicat canadien de la fonction publique.
Hey everyone, this is Candace Rennick, CUPE's National Secretary-Treasurer, and you're listening to CUPE Talk in the Maritimes.
Hey, this is Mark Hancock, CUPE National President, and you're listening to CUPE Talk in the Maritimes.
We are live on CUPE Talk in the Maritimes. I am Nick, joined alongside my host, my best pal, the New Brunswick Federation of Labor President, Chris Watson. Chris, how are you tonight, buddy?
Doing good. It's been an emotional day of reflection, as you see through our opener. Lest we forget all those who have fought and continue to fight, to protect our freedom and our rights.
I couldn't agree more with you. It is a day of reflection, a day of remembrance. And as we know, all across Canada, especially today, is a very heartfelt thank you to the men and the women who fought for us and gave us the freedom that we have today. So, of course, we have got to say that because we mean that right from our heart. And Chris, I know you were busy this morning. You had some Remembrance Day stuff that you were taking care of. How was that for you?
It was good. For those who know me a little bit more, know that I also do production down at the hockey rink here in beautiful St. John, New Brunswick. So I was down there doing some camera work for that. And it was a packed house. And there was one woman who was there from World War II, who was also a war bride, turning 101 next month, who was there. And, we were able to pay or give our thanks to her. So, and she was there to wave at everybody and nothing but smiles. So lots of emotions going on there. But, thank you to everybody that came out, not only to TD station here in St. John, but attended a ceremony wherever their community is.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. Sounds lovely. God love her. 101 to be out today and to be taking in all of the warm welcomes and the thank yous. That I'm sure that meant so much to her. I have no doubt. Chris, we got a jam-packed show nonetheless. Oh my goodness, it is jam-packed. Right, if I can say it, right to the rafters. I mean, my goodness, we've got interviews, we've got new videos for our sponsors. You and I have been working tirelessly to make sure all this stuff was done up and put together properly. What's your takeaway knowing about tonight's show and all of the stuff that we've got going forth?
Just, the list of speakers, when it comes to the content, everybody from, CLC, nurses unions, to CUPE. There's a jam-packed show, lots of great leaders, interviews taking place. So I think everybody's going to really enjoy those. I know I'm looking forward to them. I know you did, you did those interviews. So I know, you were looking forward to them, but I'm sure you're looking forward to hearing them again because the content is just so good. And like you said, as we move, as the show becomes a little more broad, we felt it was time to update those commercials. So, with those new commercials for our sponsors and everything we got going on, this is going to be one hell of a show.
It's funny because, when I think about this week and I'll put it to you like this. We started in St. John for interviews. In the round of the week, we have managed to hit Calgary, Alberta. We have managed to hit British Columbia. We have managed to hit Ontario. And we've hit New Brunswick. We have hit Nova Scotia. We've hit Prince Edward Island. My goodness, to say that we have been all over Canada this week with interviews is an understatement. The conversation amongst our members and our friends and our family have been, and I can say this, what a show. What a show you guys are producing right now. Whether it's Chris, whether it's you and I, whether it's Wes, whether it's Matthew, whether it's Michaela, whether it's your father at the helm producing it, what a show we have managed to produce, considering our 1 year anniversary is just a month and a half away.
That's insane to think that the 1 year anniversary of this show is coming up. And it all started, I think, you and I just sitting around talking. And, here we put it to fruition and here we are, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just, there's
not
nothing
to mention that we just keep growing. Like we have meetings tomorrow to discuss future activities with CUPE Talk. Wow.
Yeah, no, it's an exciting time, not only for the membership around, I'll say across Canada, but here in the Maritimes and the Atlantic area. You're listing off all those places from interviews, and I'm thinking, my God, that's an awful lot of time zones.
Yeah, it really is. And I want to give props to 8125, the CUPE's WestJet component area. I want to give props to the president, which is Alia Hussain. And what I want to say about her is that was the joke among us, was like, okay, so are you good now? I know it's 4 hours ahead. Are you good? Are you good now? So like a total trying to find the right time with us was fun. Mm-hmm. It really was fun. And then of course family things that she had to take care of and I had to take care of. So, and what made it so much fun was that interview was done last night, and it was like a quick message. Hey, how are you? Hey, I'm good for an hour and a half. Are you good right now? Call me right now. It just, you know what I mean? It really does bring excitement to it, because that's what CUPE Talk is. It's just a labor movement that we're able to expand and allow Canadians across this great country to hear it. understand that they're not the only ones for the struggle.
That's right. There's struggles all over the place, and there's victories too. But you're right, there are struggles all over the place. And, we just want people to know that, you're, like you said, you're not alone. When we do these certain interviews and we talk to the certain people, we get a little insight as to what's going on, not only in our own area, but right now, across Canada with some of these different components. So, it just shows that, when we really say we're 800,000 strong, we really are 800,000 strong, because we're able to reach out and we're able to talk to these other members. So not only, are we aware what's going on over there, they're aware what's going on from over here as well. So that's the importance of standing in solidarity.
Brother Chris, you couldn't have said that better. 800,000 strong is such a powerful statement. And hopefully, in the next couple of days, Brother Chris and I will hit this live with some big, impactful news. That's all I'll say about that. But with everything going on, again, and I can't state this enough, guys, if you're listening to this and you're a part of a local or a union or the broader movement of everything to do with the labor, Chris and I are very easy to get a hold of. We are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We're on X. We're everywhere. Reach out. Let us know, because we will hit it dead on just like we always do. And we will continue to hold the governments accountable, the CEOs. We will continue to hold them accountable for their actions. Chris, today's show, I'm going to say it. The main thing about today's show was budget. Budget.
Yeah. You mean that piece of literature with all the austerity?
That's all it was, a piece of literature. That's it. Because it couldn't be more messed up here in Canada. When that federal budget went out, it was just a complete crap show. And I will say that, and you're going to hear it on this show, why just that is, when the Canadian Labour Congress Secretary Treasurer Lily Chang and our CUPE Nationals Secretary Treasurer Candace Rennick will speak on that, along with the Ottawa CUPE Council President Mohammad, Akbar.
Yeah, no, when you look at what's going on with the public service, all these cuts, they're, that's very detrimental. And just because, these are cuts that are happening, toward our PSAC comrades, don't think that it's not going to affect any CUPE members as well, because these are people that not only live in your communities, they provide services within your communities. So, when these jobs are lost, it's going to hurt everybody everywhere. It's going to have a major impact. So, their fight is our fight, and we need to stand up, and we need to tell them that they need to go back with other politicians, and they need to work together and come back with amendment to this budget and make it so that we're not having cuts.
I couldn't agree more. Where do we go from here? Do we say goodbye to everyone and begin the show? Because you and I have been pretty open. It's a lot of interviews, but it's a lot of content that is valuable to the listener. And we mean that. It is valuable to you all to hear from every side of this situation.
Yeah, I think you're right. It might be time to just let it roll, and let's all sit back and let's enjoy this wonderful program that's known as CUPE Talk.
Hey guys, I am Nick, joined alongside the president of Ottawa's CUPE Council, Mohammad Akbar. Mohammad, you and I were talking off air. There's a lot of business to take care of, and I think it's only fair. Let's jump right into Canada's 2025 federal budget, because it is just a mess.
Oh, it's bad.
it's something, isn't it?
When we were talking about this. So the federal budget, I don't know how many people have already taken a look. This still has to get passed. Expectations are, Carney is a couple people off of a majority. He might just pull out a majority, but likely this will pass. It seems like the NDP might abstain. Not really sure what the other parties. I haven't looked at too much into it, but what I have looked into is kind of the strategy and what we're facing, right? So how the Carney government kind of pitched the federal government is an investment and austerity budget. Those were the kind of the words that were being used. And what that means is they're going to put a lot of money into different things, and they're also going to cut a bunch of other things. And what do you think, Nick, are the first things on the chopping block for the Carney government?
All of us.
Exactly. Public sector workers. You're seeing tax cuts for the rich, and you're seeing investments in the military. Not investments in like workers who are doing work on bases and things like that, but primarily the big chunk of that money is going to U.S. arms manufacturers to get more jets, more guns, more weapons, and that kind of thing. And like, all of this money is flowing through basically outside of Canada. Like when we look at some of the investments that the government is making, now there's some stuff that's going into Canada. There is like a domestic training program similar to what Doug Ford had announced. We don't know if it's as deep as what Doug Ford did, but in Ontario, he had set up these skills development programs with like friendly unions and things like that. But they're putting over money for skills development. But what was one thing I flagged was that we're investing in this budget about $1 billion over 13 years to attracting international talent. Primarily, what was the main target being the U.S. tech sector. So the idea is, okay, we want to bring as many like U.S. researchers here as possible, give them a bunch of money, develop the Canada Research Chair programs at different universities, and have these researchers in Canada. And I don't know, what do you think about that? Do you have any thoughts on all this money going to the U.S. to bring their folks over here?
So I'm going to say this. The biggest thing for me is Canada needs to be helping Canada. We have a very wonderful country here, and I've always said that I absolutely love this country. And the one thing that we're trying to express locally is buy local, buy made in Canada. Well, that makes me think that maybe our Canadian government, the Carney government, needs to say, we should invest in Canada. Because we're telling everyone that, hey, invest in Canada, but yet the Carney government is investing everywhere's but. And that, to me, is a major red flag.
100%. Like, on the one hand, we're saying we're going to invest all this money, and 100%. Imagine if we had $1 billion to put towards Canadian researchers and Canadian research and research and development for our local companies that should be coming out of the woodwork, given our, fraught trade issues. But it's unfortunately that doesn't seem. It's like it's on the more of the back burner. And in addition, like when we talk about when we're all getting cut, we're seeing cuts. It looks like up to 10% is expected at the minimum being cut from the public service. And what does that mean? It means public sector job losses. It means attrition. It means longer wait times for federal services. Even before this budget announced, you had the cuts to Canada Post, which we've talked about before, were just unreal and ridiculous. We're seeing all kinds of cuts to Canadians, and there's investment too, but it comes at the cost of these massive, massive cuts. There's an expectation of at least about 40,000 people losing their jobs in the public service across the board between 2024 and 2028. And already 10,000 cuts have already been made. So 10,000 people have already been axed or positions have been cut. I mean, I know a lot of public sector workers who have been laid off or their positions haven't been renewed. And the initial idea was, and this is what Carney said during the election, we're going to focus on not hiring more people. So attrition, right? And as people retire, we're not going to hire them. But when you get to the reality, and this is always what happens, is you say one thing during the election and something completely different happens during the race.
Here's one thing I want to talk about that you just brought up: public service cuts. And I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to get your take on it, because I feel like this will make you very, very upset, as it does me. Job reductions, 40,000 federal positions to be eliminated in 28-29, reducing the workforce from 368,000 to 330. Now, I'm going to tell you, we have got some of the best public service workers out there, hands down. And when you start talking about cutting those jobs, now at this point, you have basically said you don't care about education. You don't care about hospitals. You don't care about, I'll say, municipal government, because they needed to pay those that take care of things like water and sewage. You are basically turning your back. The current government, if you want to just wrap it up into a neat little bow, are turning their back on the Canadian people that elected them into power. Am I wrong in saying that?
You're 100% right. And, they've already cut 10,000 jobs. They're cutting all across the board. There's 15% cuts across the board. Now, initially, they had said that now the budget does include department by department breakdowns. I haven't looked at that personally as much yet, but I know there's a lot of different groups that are analyzing the budget and looking for all the different cuts and how they're affecting. But the CCPA, the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, already addressed some of those and has laid out some of the programs that are being cut. If you look, there's so much different focus on areas where and the cuts are across the board in so many ways. It's gonna mess with not only like you're killing jobs, like 40,000 jobs that we know that Canadians need public sector jobs for the services that were being provided, but also like those are jobs that kids out of school need, all that kind of thing. And a lot of my fellow workers have been complaining, and this isn't a fault of a worker, but when you're understaffed, when you're already doing the work of 3 or 4 people, there's like when you look at the CRA, people have talked about how difficult it is to get their CRA stuff sorted. Some of the housing promises that were made, those are now up in the air. You've got the healthcare. There was this big healthcare announcement before the election. Okay, and a lot of people were into it, where diabetes cover and contraceptives coverage was going to be covered. But so far, only 4 out of 5, or 1 out of 5 Canadians is covered by that. Only 3 provinces and 1 territory have signed on. And the government was basically like, yeah, we're not going to pursue this further because we don't want to spend the money on it, on this landmark promise that Canadians were so excited about. This is a strange budget, again, because of that whole idea of like, on the one hand, you're saying I'm investing. And on the other hand, you're saying I'm cutting everything and the kitchen sink. Canadians are going to see this budget for years to come. Like, this is bigger than Harper cuts in some people's analysis of the situation, And I had hopes, I thought, Mark Carney came in as a banker. Everybody knew like that kind of perspective that he brought, but everybody had hopes that, okay, maybe he's going to do things differently, like he promised to, right? And like when you talk about, okay, I'm going to do investment, that was so nebulous. There were so many ideas of what people thought that would mean, especially since we're moving a little bit away from the United States because of the issues with Trump. And then we get this.
Let's talk a little bit about the healthcare, because you just brought up 1 in 5. And that made me think, years and years ago, when I was young, we used to always say about how, like, the great thing about our healthcare is it's not free. And don't ever let anyone tell you it is free. It's not free. But when you were sick and you needed medications, you got help. When you needed help and you needed a doctor, you saw a doctor. Today in 2025, we are, I would probably say 2 in every 4, maybe even 5 don't have a family doctor. That is very alarming because we can't keep doctors. Nurses, we're at an all-time low because they're tired of being disrespected. Cleaners in the hospitals, making sure that people are comfortable, long-term care workers. This whole thing, the Carney government had an opportunity to begin to fix the foundation and help rebuild this beautiful country that we voted them into. And they have chosen to take a whole other route than what they had said in a lot of their campaign promises. And it's devastating. It really is.
It really, really is. And yeah, that's what it is. You know, one of the things that's really interesting is like when I lived in Saskatchewan, there's a great public sector or like public service in the healthcare system that Saskatchewan has. It's not perfect by any means, but you know, appointments that it takes me 12 to 24 months to get in Ontario, I could get in like 1 or 2, maybe 3 months over there. And again, like that's still outrageous, but there is access to that. And then, like, if we could actually work to expand healthcare for Canadians, I think it would make a huge difference. But there's so many cuts across the board everywhere, you know, and it's all, you know, it's slowly gonna. It's like a house of cards, right? Our public services are slowly getting crushed. Essentially, exactly what we saw with Canada Post might happen elsewhere, where they're essentially killing Canada Post, and it's going to be privatized more or less. You know, like that's the direction we're going in. And the more public services,
is the most devastating thing ever, because I don't know about you, but I see seniors all the time that are using walkers, wheelchairs, scooters. It's hard enough for them to walk out to their front yard to get their mail with door-to-door delivery, which I think is essential and something that should never be taken from anyone, because it's always been our right to have our mail delivered directly to us, just like our newspaper was. And the thought of it, give me a break. These people do not deserve that. I don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. I don't care where we're at in Canada. The great thing about Canada was we always took care of everyone. We looked out for each other. And at this point, I think the Canadian government's enjoying watching people begin fighting and arguing over things. And I just think it's damn right rude. And we need to make a difference. We need to make a change. And I would call for the Carney government to begin that change for the better of this country, not the worse.
Absolutely. You know, it's they want us to basically accept that we don't get anything. It's like, okay, you don't want you don't want a post office? Sorry. Like, you don't get a post office. You want a doctor? Sorry, we can't afford a doctor. Even though we're still spending. We are consistently spending. Even this budget has a higher deficit than many other budgets that have been released in the past. But we're choosing to spend on certain things, and those things are not your hospital. There's some spending, like there's some good things in there, like they're funding CBC more to like strengthen CBC and make it more independent, whatever. They're putting some money into like the housing, not as much as what was pitched, but they're putting some money into like housing and stuff like that. But they're essentially saying the majority, the lion's share of where they're spending is not on you, because we have to, like, in theory, make the economy better. And that's not going to be through investing in you and the things you need. It's going to be by putting money elsewhere and hoping for a return. And how has that worked out for Canada in the past? Remember all those factories we retooled for giant conglomerates for cars and such? And those companies just closed the Cami plant, right? Which, like, my comrades in Unifor have been bringing up a lot, talking about how they got screwed essentially, right? So what's the strategy, right? Like, I'm not, a high level banker or anything like that, but I know, like, if I had money in my pocket, that would go to other people in Canada, right? I would be spending, buying local, investing in Canadian products and Canadian housing and all these different things that would then stimulate, right? Like that's what I would look for investment.
So let's switch gears then. Let's get into the Alberta Teachers Association, because I think that's a very well segue right into this. talking about cuts and money and not investing back in your country. If I was the county government, I would be the guy going, wait a minute. These people are the foundation of what is next to come. And if we don't have them happy and making sure that our children, the next generation, are prepared for what this country needs to be, we're in trouble. And what I'm seeing happening out there is not only disgraceful, it is unnecessary, it is pathetic. Someone should have stepped in there and said, we need to get to the table, because regardless, we need to get something done here and now. So where's your head at with all of it?
I mean, like, how much more do we need to see from the Alberta government? Like, this is their bread and butter. This is what they do. I know that the Alberta Teachers Federation is still going through the courts to try and protect. So for those who don't know, the government used a notwithstanding clause to force the teachers back to work. And, you're seeing all this kind of government overreach more and more regularly, unfortunately. And it's just continuing to be enabled. And unfortunately, it means, the more the workers are targeted, the more that everyone is targeted, right? And there's sometimes a divide where, like, non-unionized workers don't realize that unionized workers are protecting them, or like certain unions don't see themselves in other unionized worker struggles, like, so they're like, oh, what do I care about the teachers? The teachers are already overpaid in their view, which couldn't be further from the truth. But you get that kind of perspective sometimes. But at the end of the day, like, even if you don't necessarily align with those struggles, which you should, because it's your struggle, the damage being done across the board is going to affect everybody, right? Like, if you can't strike and you get the notwithstanding clause hit against you later, you're gonna see that in your own kind of workplace. Or if your management sees, like, hey, like, we don't need to worry about these guys going on strike, it means that they can bargain with you a lot harder. And it's and they can kind of like ignore your demands because they know that the government is going to bail them out. You saw that with the Air Canada strike, where the Air Canada, with the back to work order, thought, oh, well, we didn't think we needed to bargain because we knew a back to work order would just send people back to work. And then when it didn't, they're like, oh, I guess we have to actually bargain in good faith. So it's atrocious. And like, this kind of thing happens, unfortunately, quite regularly in the prairie provinces. It's just an ongoing situation where workers are taking giant hits, and I'm thankful that we're fighting, and like that our colleagues who are Alberta teachers are trying to fight this. But it sets a bad tone for the future, for sure, and it's just an ongoing kind of like degradation of workers' rights.
So let's look at it from this standpoint. I've heard it said in the past, the one big tool that we have in our toolbox is always strike action, which is rarely taken, even though people may think, oh, I've seen it 3 or 4 times. Well, 3 or 4 times out of 30 years, and being the fact that it's rarely in the same city twice, because it just never happens, really. I have only seen a few strikes in my entire life. So when there is something out there to say, like, well, we can force them back to work, to me, like, that is the ultimate sign of disrespect. I don't care what it is. If you take strike action, that is your last resort. I think that goes for anyone. People, if you think that people enjoy going on strike, you are so misinformed, because it is the hardest thing that you're going to do, is stay positive, fight. And it's not enjoyable to be out there, whether it is raining, snowing, cold, warm, hot, spring, summer, fall, winter. It does not matter. It is awful. And when you see that, that they're trying to take away the one tool, I'll call it the one big tool that we have, because really that's the end result, is having to do this. We don't want to do it. What are your thoughts on that? And should that, in your opinion, that be stopped immediately, being forced back to work?
100%. I think this is a common union position and a common worker position, but anybody who cares about Canadian society should oppose back to work legislation. Back to work legislation kind of initially existed for what the government called essential services. The idea, like, okay, like, you know, nurses can't necessarily go on strike in the same way because, oh, like if they did, then, you know, people would die and that kind of thing. Same thing with like EMTs and this kind of thing. That's why it was initially proposed, and even that there's arguments around it. But back to work legislation in general, you know, forcing people back to work immediately hits workers' rights 100%, right? So every time you have back to work legislation, you saw it like us in Ontario, we're the masters of sending people back to work, right? Like government was always sending people back to work, whether it was liberals or conservatives. And so that, you know, that affected workers' rights here a lot. And you can see that, you know, we have a degradation of workers' rights, despite the amazing work of union leaders and union members and trying to prevent that. When you lose the ability to negotiate on a fair footing with management, you automatically lose, like you're going to lose some of your rights, benefits, all that kind of thing, which is greatly unfortunate.
Of course it is. It is greatly unfortunate. One of my biggest things that really bugs me is when I see all of this going down, and it blows my mind that our government can look and go, this is the right move. This is the right move. Where in the good Lord's name do you think that this is the right move? Because we are laying off workers. These, whether it's the teachers, the nurses, the doctors, whether it's the custodians in your school, whether it is the flight attendants, whether it doesn't matter. When you force people back to work and you are cutting jobs, we have to stand up and we have to fight, not because we want to, it's because we have to, and we will not back down from a fight. You know, that is the one thing about CUPE, more than anything I've ever seen, is, man, they do not back down from a fight. And we have a leader in President Mark Hancock, who lets us all know every rally he attends that we are not going to back down. We will move forward. We will fight this. And you know what? As far as I'm concerned, Mohammad, it is the most empowering thing you're going to feel, is that moment when he says that on a live mic.
100,000%. Yeah, to be really clear, like, I don't see any justification in back to work legislation, and especially in the way it's been used here, in using the notwithstanding clause. The notwithstanding clause existed just to get the Charter of Human Rights passed. And the idea back then was like, okay, if a provincial government says we're using the notwithstanding clause, they're essentially saying, we don't give a damn about your human rights. And that should hit, you know, like citizens and voters to be like, these guys don't care about us at all. They're like, regardless of how you use the notwithstanding clause, whether it's your working rights or your human rights or wherever, it's essentially us kowtowing and saying, yeah, the government can do whatever they want. We don't have any rights. It's us tacitly accepting that we don't have rights. So what kind of worker or citizen or person would agree to that? And we do, because the government wants us to accept that things are going to be bad and that everything around you sucks. That's what the government essentially wants. You know, they have the people that support them. They want everybody else to say, yeah, all of my priorities don't matter. I'm okay with my life just getting worse day in and day out. I don't need teachers to be well paid. I don't need my children to be taught well. I don't need my children to be taught by people who aren't overworked, understaffed. I don't need anything. I just want my taxes paid. We pay so much in taxes. And one of the things that I've always championed about around progressive taxation or whatever, like I've always said to people who say, hey, you know, you have a decent job, you do all these different things, like you pay your fair share in taxes. don't you feel like you're getting ripped off? And I say, no, like, even if I'm paying more in taxes or something like that, and this was something really interesting in the New York race we can talk about if you want with the New York mayoral race, because this came out there. People are happy to pay taxes if they're getting the services that they're paying for. But when your tax rate doesn't change and your healthcare gets worse and your children's education gets worse, you don't have daycare covered under the public sector. So I guess you got to pay thousands of dollars for daycare. You've got property tax to pay. That's when people start turning. And the government enables that because they also, some of these more conservative governments, they don't want these public services. They want money to go to building their friends, stadium or whatever, and they want to invest in projects that benefit them. They don't want to invest in projects that'll benefit you and your daily life or anything, or your kids. The person who's going to be screwed in 10, 20 years is all of the kids who are growing up and getting jaded because they can't access anything, right?
Well, I think it's one of the biggest crimes ever is that big time corporations are getting these tax cuts. While I can't speak for Ottawa, but I can tell you that my parents' property taxes have doubled, tripled. And meanwhile, we've got a $2.6 million headquarters up the road that are getting a tax break. And I just think it's damn right devastating. And again, something that needs to change. Like, you can take enough property tax out of them, and that would set everybody where they should be in the rest of this province, probably. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't add up. It's just it's really annoying. It's lack of better term, I guess.
You want to know something interesting? Because there was a tax cut. Now, there's a lot of like billionaire tax cuts that everybody's talking about with the budget. But one of the most interesting ones was they removed a luxury tax, which I think it's if you buy a yacht worth, I think it's over $150,000 or $250,000 is usually like a small tax you have to pay on that. So that was cut. So if you plan to buy a yacht soon, Nick, you'll be in luck. Mark Carney's got your back. So
I'm actually going to pick one up this afternoon. I was actually thinking I would jump on it, pick you up. We would take a trip around and get to meet each other in person if you're down.
Yeah, I was going to actually buy a jet airplane. So, perfect. I could land my jet onto your boat and we'll both save a bunch of tax money. It'll be great.
Perfect. Carney will love us.
Oh, I hope so. Hey, maybe we could pick him up, go for fishing or something. Play a round of golf.
If someone falls off the boat, if we're good, then yes, let's pick him up and go fishing.
Hey, maybe we should bring him. Maybe you should bring him on the CUPE Talk and ask him these hard questions on your yacht, on location.
I don't think there's anything wrong with. I personally would invite him to come on here and discuss this with all of our CUPE members, all the way across Canada, coast to coast to coast, and everyone associated with CUPE, even if they're not. I would still welcome him to come on this show and give his take on the worst budget I've seen in years.
Absolutely, 100%.
So I just want to say, though, that number one, I do appreciate you coming on the show, but also it's so nice to catch up with you. I appreciate you a lot. I know you're busy, and having you here today is just, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Hey, likewise. Thanks for having me. Keep up the great work. I listen very regularly. I'm a big fan of the show. So I'm excited to see what you do next.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Take care.
Higgins Insurance, we understand that protecting what matters most, your family, your home, your livelihood, is not just a policy, it's a promise. As a trusted provider serving Atlantic Canadians for over 25 years, we're proud to offer personalized coverage tailored to your unique needs, whether it's auto, home, or life insurance. Our team is committed to transparency, reliability, and exceptional service, ensuring peace of mind through every stage of life. Let Higgins Insurance be your partner in protection. Because when it comes to your future, you deserve nothing less than confidence. the official insurance of CUPE Talk.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of Where Did It All Start? And today we are very privileged to have CUPE 2745 Regional VP Erin McAllister with us. Erin, welcome to CUPE Talk in the Maritimes.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
I can tell you're just ecstatic. I can see it all over you. Now, the great thing about this is our very first show that we did was with the Secretary Treasurer of CUPE National, Candace Rennick. And you are now the second person to ever do this show. And what makes this show so great is that we're able to talk about the beginning of your activism, where it started, the reason for getting involved and moving up, and all the different titles you may or may not have held prior to becoming the regional VP. So let's start off very quickly with, tell us how you ended up getting involved in CUPE Local 2745.
All right. Well, how I got involved, my mother was an educational assistant for years as I was growing up. I watched her very closely and what she was doing, building relationships with the kids and moving on and getting more involved in the union. So I have a strong background in union activism. I enjoyed seeing her be the voice for kids that some couldn't talk, so she would be the voice. It was very nice to see. I would watch what she was doing. I became more interested in it. I went to school, went to college, applied to become an EA. When I became an EA, I was told I had to start going to meetings. So I went to meetings, I got sworn in, I didn't miss a meeting after that. It was interesting. I was learning a lot. After a while, there was a vacancy come up, and I was kind of voluntold to put my feet forward and take the jump. So I did. It was interesting. I didn't know if I should or not, but I had a lot of support behind me, a lot of great leaders teaching me things. So I took the plunge. I put my name forward. I got voted in. So I did that. I also worked in the childcare for CUPE 2745 before I done that. So I was learning a little bit that way as well. Yeah, so I was kind of voluntold to get involved, but I looking back, I'm glad I was.
Well, I've always heard Chris Watson, brother Chris Watson, president of the Federation of Labor here in New Brunswick. He used to say to me, somehow you two were always intertwined. Like you started around the same time with your activism. Yeah, you seem to had always kind of crossed each other's path throughout your activism. And, having somebody and you're able to watch somebody, you're learning, when you spend a lot of time around people, you tend to pick up all their good habits. I don't want to say bad habits because I don't want to. But would you say that Chris was able to do that for you and vice versa, like being around each other a lot in the labor movement?
Yes, Chris and I, and also Iris, the president for CUPE New Brunswick, we all started around the same time, so we all crossed paths a lot. We became very good friends, and we learned from each other. We helped each other through the tough times, the easy times. We were there. It's always nice to see both of them. I love seeing them. Those are friendships that will last forever. So yeah, it's great, and it's great to be able to see how they grew and how I'm growing. And we always talk to each other and say, "So, what do you think's next? What's coming up?" When we did start, we started as young workers, and we used to talk about what our plan was in the future. And
Well,
here we are.
I'd be remiss if I didn't say about your mother. You know, we have to touch on her because she's not only important to you for many reasons, she's important to us as well, and someone who's been on this show more than once. But you talk about big shoes to fill. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that because, you know, again, funny how it works because I always say Chris had big shoes to fill. You know what I mean? So again, intertwined.
Yeah.
What's that like having a mother who is so respected by her peers? And I mean, I've seen your mother when she's, you know, ready to go and she is beaming to, you know, get something done or get involved in something. What's that like for you? Does that draw energy for you?
It does. I really enjoy watching her fight. She fights tooth and nail for every one of her members. She tries to help fight for members that do not belong to 2745 also. So it's very, I enjoy watching her. She's a very strong woman all the way around.
I couldn't agree more. I really couldn't. Tell me about some of the roles you held in the beginning. You know, like when you said about they kind of gave you the voluntold, you know, what role was that in the beginning?
So as I mentioned before, I started out working the childcare. So anytime there was meetings or AGMs or anything, I got involved with the childcare through another great mentor, Sharon Thompson.
Okay.
So I used to work closely with her and she taught me a lot there. So that got me more interested. So when the vacancy came about to be a zone shop steward, my mother volunteered me and said, you should do it. I had Sharon always tell me that I'd be good at whatever I wanted to do. So between her and my mother, I took the plunge. I became the zone shop steward for the Miramichi area. So I overseen any members in that area for I had that role for approximately 7 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was doing that. I was under another great leader for those 7 years was Ida Haggerty, another great activist, fought tooth and nail for her members, was great, taught me everything, took me under her wing. She taught me a lot of what I know now, and I am very appreciative that she did. I currently am the regional vice president, which Ida was in her time. At her passing, I had to slide into that role because I was at that time the chief shop steward. So I took on that role, and Ida always told me she was not worried about what would happen if she was finished or anything like that. She had faith in me and knew that I could do the job, she told me. So those are words that I'll remember forever that she said to me. So I moved into that role, and I've done that for 3 years now, and just recently got reelected for another 2-year term.
Yay. That's
Yeah.
exciting. When did that happen?
That just recently happened at our AGM.
That was like a couple weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'll get balloons to come up at this point. That's great. That's really great, though. Seriously, I mean that in all seriousness. That's awesome. And you know what? They're voting you in because of that. You are doing a great job, and you do stand up for your members. And you are very passionate about the labor movement, and your activism shines through every time. I just spent time with you in PEI while we were at another rally, and I see you going, and that's the kind of stuff that we thrive on because it's contagious and completely let it out, and those vibes are picked up by everyone. So you should be proud of yourself. Way to go.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
I am proud, and I have a lot of great people to be thankful for. As I mentioned, like, my mom is my biggest person. Like, she's my go-to for everything. Sharon Thompson taught me a lot. Ida Haggerty taught me a lot. Danny Legier was also another big favorite of mine. He's taught me a lot. He took everybody under his wing. So I have a lot of respect for them, and also, it's hard to believe that they're no longer with us, but
it is.
The memories are always going to be there.
Yes, they are. And definitely here to them because all of them great activists and wonderful people. And they were real, true assets to the labor movement. So we'll finish with this. What advice would you give to the next generation? You were voluntold, and that got you started. So what advice would you give to the next generation coming into the labor movement?
Well, there's a lot of advice that I can give. I mean, a lot of people think union is a crazy word sometimes. The advice that I can give them is to take a minute, learn who the union is, what they do, what they can do, and soak it all up. Ask questions, a lot of questions, because you're always going to be learning. Nobody ever has the answers to everything. But just give it time, and just learn about the union, learn about all the different unions and what it represents and what it does, and learn about your rights and fight for your rights, and help encourage others to learn their rights and fight for them as well.
Erin McAllister, I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you having me.
CUPE's National Secretary Treasurer, Candace Rennick, and we are discussing all things federal budget, one of the most irresponsible budgets, and I will say that. Candace, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Well, you know what? There's a lot going on, so we're going to get right into it. And I'm going to start like this. The government is cutting 40,000 jobs to be fiscally responsible. What does the gutting of public services actually mean for Canadians needing EI and senior support?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Look, I mean, you're right. It is a completely irresponsible budget. And these dramatic cuts will have an impact on workers who provide them, people who access them, Departments have shared some details about their plans, but we won't know everything really until they publish their annual detailed department plans, which aren't due until the spring. So I think we'll have a better sense of how deep the impact is then. But what we do know now is that many departments are planning to replace staff with AI. This is something that we have feared for quite a long time. So to give you a couple examples of things that we do know, the Canada Revenue Agency is planning to use AI for risk scoring. The CRTC is planning on using AI for its spam reporting center. The Department of Finance is planning to use it for research. The federal government's looking at it for using AI for back office operations. I say that in air quotes, all across the federal public service. So we really are talking about the loss of good paying jobs in our communities, all to AI. Employment and social development, Canada has been less specific about how they plan to use AI, but they administer, as you know, key programs like employment insurance, what else? Old age security, the CPP, the temporary foreign worker program. So AI is probably and likely going to be used to respond to questions and concerns from people having issues accessing these programs, which is really such a disastrous and offensive response, given we know how important it is for people to be able to speak to a live human being on issues such as so important to their lives as OAS and CPP. I mean, the other main way that these cuts will show up, I think, is by departments cutting programs that they administer, which will cut both staff and transfers. But some of these programs will be cut back or eliminated entirely right away, and others will just quietly not have their funding renewed. So, I mean, it's disastrous in so many ways. Health Canada, for example, has said they're eliminating programs that are in low demand or provide minimal health benefits to people. But we know that there are hundreds and hundreds of people who rely on these programs still. But it's really been hard to assess the impact because we don't yet have the full list of programs that are expected to be cut.
And I mean, let's be clear. AI has no place in the federal government world when it comes to seniors, when it comes to, I don't care the age, it has no place in it. We are told all the time that do not automatically assume AI is right, because AI makes a lot of mistakes. And the thought that the government would even want to put something like that in place, that just tells me that their only concern is trying to keep money in their pockets. And that is really alarming to me.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Imagine being a senior citizen needing to get answers on your old age security or your CPP and having to deal with an automated system to give you responses. I mean, it is an absolute offensive, outrageous response to the moment that we're living in. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely it is. So the finance minister says that these cuts are necessary to fight the deficit. Why is the economic argument wrong? And what's CUPE's alternative?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, first and foremost, the federal deficit is at a manageable level, despite what they want us to believe. They want us to believe that things are in crisis. There is no need to implement these cuts. I mean, Canada's net federal debt, I think, is like, 33% of GDP. It is small by historical standards, small relative to other countries. It's smaller than the private debt of Canadian businesses and households. It makes sense for governments to increase their deficits during economic recessions, which while businesses and households are spending less. It is the perfect time for governments, to borrow in order to build what our communities need, which is putting people to work right now, creating healthier communities in the long run. I mean, look, I don't need to tell you this or your listeners this. Public services are in higher demand when times are tough, and this budget completely ignores the value of people in favor of private capital. And that focus ignores the reality that, as an example, emergency rooms across Canada are closing because we don't have enough staff, not because we don't have the physical space. Defense spending increased by $82 billion over the next 5 years, but there are very few details about how this spending will actually be allocated. So the impact to communities would be very different if this money was focused on improving wages, housing, buying equipment from Canadian manufacturers, than if the federal government spends it on this, controversial global dome system from the US defense contractors. So CUPE's alternative is to invest in public infrastructure instead of privatizing it. It's to invest in workers who provide public services so that our communities can be supported through these tough times. We know that's what our community needs, and research has always shown us that this type of investment has a bigger impact on longer term growth. It attracts more private sector investment in the long run. And what our country truly needs right now is a stronger social safety net, not a weaker one. And that in part is what CUPE is going to be advocating for.
Absolutely. Let's be honest. Let's invest right here in our own country. Let's worry about the people here. Let's put them to work. That's what we want. I thought it was elbows up Canada.
Well, and I think this is the thing. Everybody thought that Mark Carney was going to be the big savior of Canada. I mean, not everybody, let's be clear, but they thought he was going to be a more gentler approach than a Pierre Poilievre government, for example. But I mean, if this budget is any indication of what our country is in for, we ought to be very concerned.
Yes, 100%. And speaking of concern, let's talk just a little bit about Atlantic Canada. Federal jobs are vital here in Atlantic Canada. How will this hostility budget specifically hurt workers and services right here in the Maritimes?
No, I mean, it's a good question. I'm sure it's one that your listeners care a lot about. I feel like for me, I don't know that's a question I can fully answer right now because we don't know where exactly all of the federal job losses will be yet. We do know that fisheries and oceans plan to use AI and digital tools to modernize fisheries management. I say that in air quotes. And they are planning to reduce reviews and authorizations for some projects. So that will likely, almost certainly mean job losses for the workers involved. The federal government's cutting $4.2 billion from Veterans Affairs Canada over 4 years. That's going to dramatically affect the healthcare services that veterans have had access to under this department. And we know that it will be harder for Maritimers to access services such as seniors benefits or EI, for example. Departmental plans to implement digital tools such as, like chatbots and AI, they absolutely guarantee a lower level of services. But how this is going to impact Maritimers directly and immediately, I think that remains to be seen. And we're going to see more clarity on that when the spring departmental plans get rolled out.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the biggest things what I'm hearing really is job loss, job loss, job loss. So before I do move on to the next question, I just want to say shame on the Carney government. Yeah. Shame on you. Now, this budget is a hard pivot, really, from last year's investments. Why do you think the government is choosing hostility now while the cost of living is still so high?
Yeah, I mean, this budget can and absolutely should be described as an austerity budget for people and services in exchange for investment in privatization and corporate subsidies. I mean, a good example of that is, Budget 2025 CRA cut the luxury tax on the grounds that it was too expensive to administer, but they're continuing to put resources into pursuing individuals who received CERB overpayments. So I mean, the luxury tax brought in more revenue than the CERB overpayments are ever expected to bring in. It makes absolutely no sense. It is an attack on the little guy while letting the rich and the powerful off the hook, which is the same old story we see over and over again. Mark Carney and the people he has surrounded himself with come largely from the private financial sector. They believe that economic growth comes from shrinking government, from lowering taxes, subsidizing the private sector, which is an outdated philosophy called neoliberalism that was championed by Mulroney and Ronald Reagan in the 1980s. And CUPE knows and understands that this is a pathway that leaves workers behind, and the best path to a stable, prosperous economy is through stable public services, public infrastructure, and good paying jobs that allow people to stay in the communities where their families are from. And that is what CUPE is going to continue to advocate for and continue to fight for.
Well, we know that this is clearly a fight. There's no question.
Yeah.
And, I want to talk a little bit about CUPE's plan to mobilize against these cuts. I know you're kind of saying it throughout, but, what can members do to help? What can we do, Candace, to get the word out there and show government that we are not happy either?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And we do have a communication strategy to let people know about the cuts, make sure that they understand what's coming down in the budget. We're going to be monitoring the impacts of the cuts across communities and sharing those with our members so that they can talk to their members about these issues. We're going to be working with our allies because we cannot do this work alone. So workers like the federal public sector unions who are being hit the hardest, the Canadian Labour Congress, the Council of Canadians, to mobilize Canadians, our members, and the communities where we live to speak out against these cuts. And we're going to be working on a federal campaign to harness our greatest and most powerful resource, and that's CUPE members. Getting them active, engaged, and outraged to respond to this austerity agenda so that we can advance solutions that make life better for people. That's what we're going to be focused on, and those campaign strategies and details are going to be made available in the weeks ahead, and we really hope to engage CUPE members in communities all across the country, because the only way we're going to be able to push back against this is by mobilizing, organizing, coming together, and showing the government, no, this isn't on for us, this isn't what we elected you for, and we expect proper investment in people and public services across the country, not austerity that make the rich a whole lot richer.
Candace, I couldn't do it without you.
You're so kind.
You are very kind to come on here today and express your concerns with the budget and share it with the members and all the people across Canada. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for using your platform to shine a light on this. It's so important for people to know more about what's coming.
We will continue to shine lights when it comes to anything CUPE. You know that we love it, and we want the members to be aware at all times.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for everything you do.
Hey guys, I am Nick London, the host of CUPE Talk in the Maritimes, joined very, very proudly by the CLC's Secretary Treasurer, Lily Chang. Lily, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much, Nick, for this opportunity.
I'm going to tell you, there is so much going on since the announcement of this so-called federal budget that my head has been spinning. And I got to say, you have got to be just wondering what is going on.
Well, certainly I can't say that we're surprised, but certainly it, we were still really hoping that it wouldn't be as bad as it is.
I couldn't agree more. And, having you come on here to discuss some of this is a real pleasure of ours. And you being a Secretary Treasurer of the Canadian Labour Congress is definitely the right person to have this discussion with. So I will start off like this. The government, as we know, they say they're cutting 40,000 jobs to be fiscally responsible. What does the gutting of public service actually mean for Canadians needing EI or senior support?
Well, 40,000 jobs, that's a whole lot, right? And, this budget is landing at a time of, deep uncertainty across the country. You've got workers who are facing rising costs. We have a growing trade crisis. Public programs already stretched the limit. And the U.S. Tariffs are already costing thousands, tens of thousands of Canadian jobs. So this budget was an opportunity to show Canada is ready to stand up for workers. But unfortunately, it's failed to meet the moment. And the deep public service cuts that it's proposing will absolutely hurt workers, families, and communities all across Canada. But in terms of EI or senior support, fewer frontline staff will mean longer delays for EI claims and pension applications. They will reduce numbers of people working in call center for support purposes. I know the government has talked about, relying on more AI and automation, but complex cases like EI appeals or seniors who have unique circumstances, they're not going to get the kind of support that they need from this reduced human oversight. And also we know from surveys that there is already burnout among remaining staff, right? So federal workers are already stretched thin and facing like overwork, and it's only going to hurt service quality. So EI claimants are going to have longer processing times, and especially during economic downturns, right? We're going to have people waiting in line for longer. We're going to have seniors applying for OAS and GIS. They're going to have delays in their benefit approvals, and so all of this is going to reduce the live support. Now, I just want to talk a minute about EI particularly, because this trade war is just wreaking havoc with Canadian jobs, right? Our unemployment rate has been at 7%, which is the highest in recent decades. And, all of these folks are going to need EI, right? So if EI can barely help people make ends meet, then, less people are going to qualify. They already get too little money to help them through this job loss. So this is not a time to reduce services or adding, 40,000 more people to the jobless market, right? So, we know that the reality is you can't create jobs by cutting thousands of them, and you can't grow the economy by shrinking public services. And these deep cuts will mean that people will face longer wait times, not only for EI and senior supports, but also for passports, childcare benefits, CRA, and reduce public health and food safety as well. So it's a big concern for all of us.
It really is a big concern. And, when I think of the seniors, it's hard enough for them to adapt to the little changes. We're about to put something on their lap that they are not ready for.
Exactly. I mean, many seniors can't navigate online applications anyways, right? So having them rely more upon AI and automation, that doesn't help them. They need live people. They need one-on-one. And we're not serving them properly if we're going to abandon them at this point in time in their life.
I agree with you that, the federal government is not being responsible when you're not thinking of the seniors and those that are in need. There are so many different things that people need help with, and we're just basically acting like it's no big deal. By we, I mean the federal government, because we certainly do not want this for anyone.
No,
And
exactly. Yeah.
of course, the finance minister was saying about these cuts being necessary to fight a deficit. But why is the economic argument wrong? And what's the CLC's alternative?
Well, his argument is flawed because it ignores how these cuts will weaken essential services and slow economic growth and will actually worsen fiscal stability. And so the CLC is instead arguing for investment-led solutions like strengthening our public services, creating good jobs and building resilience through housing, infrastructure, and fair taxation. Now, if this government wants to balance revenue with spending, it should look at the rich people and the corporations that can afford it. In the first 6 months of this government, it has reversed the changes to the capital gains tax, giving the top 1% of the richest Canadians a $19 billion tax cut over 5 years. It also gave way to a middle class tax cut that benefited the richest Canadians a lot more than the middle class got. And on Jeff Bezos' wedding day, the government removed the digital services tax, which gave tech bros a $6 billion tax cut. And despite promising to be elbows up and fighting Trump tariffs, it removed all of our counter tariffs. So that's like $20 billion in projected revenue that just evaporated. And in the meantime, it promised to expand defense funding to match NATO targets and increase border spending to appease Trump. And now it looks at its balance sheet and says, oops, we're running low on money. We need to cut public services. So, basically our message to the government is really simple. Invest in people, not cuts, and get the rich and powerful to pay their fair share.
That is like gospel, because they get the biggest tax breaks of all. And we are all well aware of it because we all have billionaires and millionaires that live all over this country. And they literally build these big giant corporations, these big headquarters buildings, and they pay hardly anything for taxes. And they are literally catered to by our federal government. How about we make a change? And like you said, they need to be held accountable. They need to make sure that they pay their share, because it not only helps the people of their province or their city, but it helps Canada as a whole.
Exactly. So it's time to follow through with that. Exactly.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, you know this, that federal jobs are vital in Atlantic Canada. So how will this austerity budget specifically hurt workers and services here in the Maritimes?
Well, Atlantic Canada, the demographics there. So first of all, we know that, federal employment there is really a key to stability, right? So the public sector counts for a larger share of jobs and income in Atlantic Canada compared to other regions across the country. So reductions in the federal jobs will lower incomes and reduce local spending in Atlantic communities that are already facing demographic challenges. And we also know that, for example, there are particular federal operations in Atlantic Canada that could face these cuts, including, we know there's a Veterans Office and Revenue Canada based in Charlottetown, and then Fisheries and Oceans operates in Halifax and Moncton. So particularly, EI delays, we were talking about that earlier.
Yep.
These are what is required for seasonal industries, right? And the Atlantic relies heavily on these particular industries, whether we're talking fisheries, tourism, agriculture. They rely heavily on EI. So cuts will mean slower claim processing, and these workers will have a harder time getting income, accessing income during their off seasons. We also know that Atlantic Canada has one of the oldest populations in Canada. So, of course, reduced staffing, in the seniors programs, that risks delays in pension payments and less personalized support. The other thing about, I think, Atlantic Canada that we need to remember as well is that, many people live outside major centers, right? There are lots of rural and remote communities. And so cutting local service Canada offices, that will force people to have to travel farther or navigate digital systems that aren't always accessible, as we already talked about. So the very programs that cushion Atlantic Canada against seasonal work cycles and the aging demographics, they're the ones that are most at risk.
They really are. I agree 100%. And again, like you said, even though we've talked about it, longer drives, well, again, hard on seniors, and they're not being responsible. And it's an awful thing to think that our federal government, the leaders of this country, supposedly are not being responsible for all Canadians.
Exactly. This is not a time to abandon people who worked all their lives and now deserve to have a dignified retirement.
That's right. I couldn't agree more. This budget, it is a hard pivot from last year's investments. Why do you think the government is choosing austerity now while the cost of living is still so high?
Well, there's been a lot of people weighing in on this question, and I guess from my perspective, a lot has happened in the past year, but one of the biggest significant things is that we had an election right between these two budgets, and the NDP lost official party status. So the last time that this happened, where the NDP lost party status, this was in 1993, and the Liberals cut services. And then Conservatives would scream, not deep enough. The same dynamics are at play right now. And the fact is that when workers in our political arm don't hold enough leverage, the other parties do what they've always wanted to do, right? So this budget, it wasn't just terrible on public services. By their own admission, the important investment that the budget makes are not even going to be coming into fruition for at least 5 years or maybe 10 years. And if you're a public servant in Charlottetown losing your job, or an auto worker in Windsor losing your job, or forestry worker in New Brunswick or BC, do you have 5 to 10 years to find another job? Does your EI cover enough for you not to lose your home? So this budget, it does very little to protect jobs now or address, working people's immediate economic needs now. And again, I keep coming back to this. When the Liberals' political life depends on NDP votes in the House of Commons, we get anti-scab legislation, we get pharmacare, we get dental care, we get school nutrition programs. But when they don't think they need NDP support, they're out there shopping for conservative floor crossers. What we get is we get tax cuts for the rich and service cuts for the rest of us.
Yeah, the NDP is definitely the way to go, and they have always been so supportive. And people, they when the Liberals get in there, this is exactly what we knew would happen, and it's absolutely terrible. And the same thing can be said with the Conservatives most of the time as well, because this sort of thing needs to stop. The NDP had a game plan, and I can guarantee you it was the betterment of Canadians all the way across this nation. And, it's things like that when we have to take a step back and we need to start thinking about what's important to us, not what's important for the Liberals and the Conservatives, because it's just, this happens every time. Like you said, 1993, a very similar thing went down. And we need to stop this. It cannot keep going around and around. We need to make change, and it needs to happen ASAP.
Absolutely.
Now, clearly, this is a fight.
Yeah.
What is the Canadian Labour Congress's plan to mobilize against these cuts, and what can our members do to help this cause?
Well, the CLC is calling on Parliament to amend the budget. We want them to protect public services, strengthen healthcare, modernize employment insurance, protect labor rights, close the corporate tax loopholes, and ensure that the wealthiest pay their fair share. And also to make generational investments, right, which we're not seeing. Generational investments in housing and infrastructure and the domestic production that Canada needs to secure our economic future. And of course, we're going to be doing everything that we can in our power to protect public services and the people who provide them. And it's talking to politicians from all parties, right, wherever we feel that we can get support. We're also, we do have currently a campaign called workerstogether.ca, where members or anybody who cares about this can tell their MPs that we need real solutions and not cuts. So if you go to workerstogether.ca, it's very easy. You can send a letter to your MP. And the other thing that I would ask members to do is to come out to our lobby day. So our lobby day is coming up in a few days, and we're going to be working with all the parties to find some common ground and solutions to protect workers. But let's not forget what happens when the NDP is weak, right? In the long term, we do need to strengthen workers' power by rebuilding the NDP and ensuring that it can drive the agenda in Parliament. This isn't about partisanship, it's about strengthening our collective voice. So to everyone who's listening into this program, I hope that you get involved, elect worker-friendly representatives at every level of government, and keep pushing these people to stand up for workers each and every day.
And guys, just because she brought it up, the QR code that's right there in the corner, that's the QR code that is going to take you directly to that site so you can show support and stand behind the CLC and all of its affiliates, all of us together as one. So go there, scan it with your phone, and check it out. It is you'll be happy you did, and we're going to be happy that you did. So Lily Chang, I have to say one more time, that I appreciate you and very glad that you would take the time to come on the show.
Anytime, Nick. And I didn't say this at the beginning, but in addition to being the CLC Secretary Treasurer, I am a proud CUPE member. So thank you so much, and thank you to all the CUPE members out there who day in and day out serve people across this country as well. Thank you.
Charred Oak Designs creates custom, personalised gift products with 2 lasers, a CNC, and all the woodworking tools needed to create your perfect gift. From board games, cutting boards for wedding gifts, and everything in between. Got an idea? Give me a shout at info@Charred Oak CA. Find me on Facebook under Charred Oak Designs.
Hey guys, I am Nick, joined alongside CUPE 8125 President Alia Hussain, and we are talking all things WestJet right now because I'm going to tell you the campaign has launched. It is all about fairness and respect. Alia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick.
I know that you are crazy busy. I know that there's lots going on. So I understand that you being able to give me any time at all has been just an absolute pleasure. And I've got to say right off the hop, what a campaign. Tell me a little about it.
So the campaign is kind of started from the original airline division campaign of Unpaid Work Won't Fly, which the airline division launched to raise awareness about all the unpaid work that flight attendants in Canada do, but it's also part of a larger movement globally that flight attendants across North America and really the world are raising awareness on the amount of time that we do spend at work doing regulated and safety-related responsibilities that go unpaid.
Can we just talk about how absolutely, if I can say this, pathetic that is? Unpaid work won't fly. You're friggin' right they won't. I mean, you guys should have been paid a long time ago for all those things because without you, travelers wouldn't know the protocols behind everything.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more. And like when you think about when the periods of time that are unpaid are typically periods of time where some of the most serious incidents or events are taking place, like evacuations, for example. You don't see too many evacuations taking place in flight. But once you're on the ground, medical incidents, safety events, evacuations, security risks, metering, ground delays, all this stuff, all regulated. We're expected to stay on the aircraft with the passengers as per Transport Canada, but we're not paid.
That is so unbelievable to me because, you know, sometimes we all need to be educated on different things. And one of the things that Brother Chris Watson, who is the Federation of Labor here in New Brunswick, he's the president. And, you know, when he first told me that, did you know they're not paid prior and then post? And I thought, that can't be true. And then hearing everything that went on with Air Canada and then hearing it now with you and this launch has been great because it has given me more to read and more to just be like, oh my God, like this is so awful.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of folks don't recognize, and again, the industry is shrouded in a lot of secrecy, but a lot of folks don't recognize that when we do show up at the aircraft, it's usually an hour before departure. And that hour before departure, we're checking all the safety equipment. We're doing quick security searches on board and preparing the aircraft for departure, and entirely unpaid. Even while we're boarding, we're not paid. Our pay doesn't trigger until the aircraft pushes back. And so in the simplest form, if that aircraft isn't moving, your flight attendants are not being paid. And how this ties to the ultra basic campaign is that we fully respect, and we want to be clear, we fully respect our guests' choice to decide whatever fare level they want, right? We recognize there are some folks who want things to be cost efficient and other folks like to have a more premium experience. But our point to the organization is that while our guests should have the right to choose, we should not be exposed to that choice through our compensation models, which historically An airline's what's the word they use? An airline's classification, like for example, Air Canada is known as a full service carrier, while WestJet's known as a value hybrid carrier. And what WestJet has introduced is an ultra low cost carrier, which only serves to drive wages down. Our point is it's cool, let our guests choose, but from our perspective, our responsibilities haven't changed as a result of fare classes changing. We still have to do pre-flights. We still have to stay on the plane after deplaning. Delays remain the same and evacuations remain the same. So we are simply asking to be treated fairly and be compensated appropriately.
Well, I think it's long overdue. One of the things I want to talk about, and I read this earlier about once known for its caring brand has drifted away from its values. How important is it for those big airline companies, those CEOs, to understand just how valuable you all, the workers, are to this brand?
You know, I have to say it's central. As a original, I call myself an original WestJetter, even though I've only actually been there for 18 years. One of the things that made us successful as an organization was this thing called the Wobble Board, which is we take care of our people, who take care of our guests, who take care of the business. And it was this circle of this interaction that really described the company. And as a result of us going private and now being held by a private equity firm and having several executive CEO changes, we've seen a lot of erosion of that culture, that internal culture. And I'm sure our guests are feeling the same way. And so I also want to be clear, this isn't about damaging the brand. As flight attendants, we're very proud of being flight attendants and proud of being WestJetters, but we're no longer owners, and it's the new owners who are making these decisions, and from our perspective, are overlooking our valuable contribution to the business. Flight attendants are the longest touch point for any guest, period. Because these days, when you go to the airport, you can get your boarding pass on your iPhone. You walk up, you can self-tag your bags and get them checked into a machine, and then you go through security, and then the first WestJetter you actually interact with is the gate agent. And according to WestJet, that's about 9 seconds of an interaction. The rest of your entire WestJet experience will be the flight attendants on board.
I have flown quite a bit, and to be honest with you, I feel so it isn't the pilots, not to take anything away, but the flight attendants make you feel good. They make you feel safe. They interact with you. And to know that as of right now, they were doing that unpaid, to me, speaks volumes about the flight attendants, but also it shows me that they care and that you're right. They really enjoy being flight attendants and they love their job.
Absolutely. And the other piece here is that, you know, I've heard the argument for decades, this was normal. Why do you guys want to change it now? And the response to that is that a practice that's long-standing, such as this, doesn't mean it's fair. And when norms are questioned, such as this, because this was an industry norm, Air Canada kicked in through the door and made some pretty decent changes considering their circumstances recently. But there's always discomfort and resistance because not because what we're challenging is wrong, but rather because people are used to the way things have always been. And so from a company perspective, we're your largest working group. We're 4,700 flight attendants out of an organization that's approximately 14,000. So we are without a doubt the largest working group, and getting us at a discount and a discount for this many years works in the business's favor. However, we're here to say this is not right and this is not fair, and it's time that you appropriately compensate us.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you. You know, one thing I do want to talk about is the ultra extra basic.ca. You know, building that, creating that website, allowing people to go there and show support, and just let WestJet know that, you know, what you're doing, the working conditions have got to be better. And, how have you found having that website beneficial to you and the members?
You know what? It's landing really well, and both internally and externally. It's been a really interesting week because I've had people who are not flight attendants but work within the organization reach out to me and tell me that they fully feel like we've lost our way, and that this campaign, very respectfully, is asking for realignment, and that we deserve fair pay and respect. So it's landing really well. From the public, it's also an awareness piece. A lot of the public aren't aware. And of course, there's this natural trepidation. People will tie us asking for our fair share to various other things. The reality here is that fares don't have to get increased in order for flight attendants to get paid. The amount of money that would be shifted over to the flight attendant portfolio is nowhere near what's being shifted into the pockets of Onyx Corporation. So it's just big business making more money, and we're just asking for our fair share of what we contribute to the success of the organization.
Well, I think it's important, and I think that it is long overdue. And I want you to know that I will continue to draw attention to the ultraextrabasic.ca until things are finalized and you guys get what you deserve. And like I said, it's long overdue, and I respect everything that you guys do.
I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate the time to raise awareness to our cause, because ultimately this boils down to a values conversation about when people are at work, especially if they're performing safety or federally regulated responsibilities, shouldn't they be paid?
100%.
Hey guys, I am Nick, and I am joined alongside the president of the New Brunswick Nurses, Paula Doucet. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nick.
It is such an honor to have you. I know we have been playing tag back and forth, and I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you taking the time today to have a little discussion about the nurses. And of course, I would be remiss if we did not sit and have a chat about, I will say it, the one and only Blair Doucet. And of course, the Blair Doucet camp, which is very near and dear to everyone's heart, especially yours. And I know what it meant to my co-host, Chris Watson, to have that up and running and be a part of that this year. So first and foremost, I'll get right into it. How long have you been involved in nursing?
So I graduated from the Bathurst School of Nursing, which is no longer around, in 1996. So I've been a nurse for 29 years.
Wow. And how long have you been the president?
So I took over president of NBNU in October of 2016. Prior to that, I was the vice president for 13 years. So yeah, I've been around NBNU for a long time.
So would I be wrong in saying that the apple didn't fall far from the tree?
Absolutely. I mean, I often talk about how fortunate I am and how I feel like I'm an anomaly because I grew up in such a strong labor household. As you mentioned, my dad, Blair Doucet, he was the president of the United Steelworkers in Bathurst at the mines for 16 years. He was the president of the Federation of Labor before it became a full-time position. He fought to have that a full-time position when he no longer offered. And my mom was a proud UFCW member. So I was surrounded by it. I had no choice, Nick.
The apple didn't even fall off the tree then.
No. Pretty much. And I'm proud to say that my very first unionized job, and not many people know this, but I was young and trying to find myself like many do. And I went out to Kitchener, Ontario, and I was working in a factory, and I signed my first union card with the steelworkers. So I was very proud to let my dad know that I was a steelworker for a brief period of time when he said, it's time for you to come home and go back to school to become the nurse that you always wanted to be. So here we are.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is a really neat story.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. So let's talk a little bit about challenges that the nurses face here in New Brunswick. What are some of those?
There's a long list, right? We've seen everything from short staffing to heavy workloads. The acuity of the patients that they care for has drastically increased over the years. We see employers that are now trying to cut corners, right? There was exorbitant amounts of spending happening throughout the pandemic, especially on private for-profit agency nurses. So now Horizon in particular is trying to cut back on spending to make up the dollars that were spent. We know that Vitalite is still utilizing private for-profit agencies. If not, we'd not have hospitals and services in some of our northern communities here in New Brunswick. Violence is another huge thing that's been, exponentially getting worse year after year. People are expecting care immediately. Sometimes, they lose their cool on the very people that are trying to provide the best care possible. And we're seeing that more and more in acute care settings, in long-term care settings, out in the public. We've got a lot of nurses that work out in the public with public health, mental health, and addictions. Our extramural nurses, they're going into folks' homes. So there's a lot of concerns out there, and there's a lot of issues that we've been raising with both employers and government that we need to make a shift. And I know it's not going to happen overnight, but I think there's some cultural awareness that needs to take place. And if we don't start now, it's never going to change.
We have to start.
Yes, absolutely.
We're almost backed into a corner. I don't think the government understands how important our New Brunswick nurses are, and it's a damn shame. We need them, and we need them to be here in New Brunswick working. If it's awful where we are right now. So when I hear those changes, but those circumstances, things that need to change, things that need to better our province, it's not a conscious decision. It's the right decision, but also the government just needs to take accountability and accept that these changes need to happen.
Yeah, I don't solely lay it on the blame of government, because employers have a lot to do with it as well, right? And so, when I talk about RHAs, for instance, right, our regional health authorities, we have Vitalite, Horizon, and Extramural is a third one. And so when they get funding, they get a certain amount of funding. It's up to them, the CEOs and the directors and the VPs, to decide how they're going to utilize that funding best for the delivery of care. So there's no playbook that comes down from government, except that it needs to be for delivery of care for New Brunswickers the best way possible. So that's why I say that some of this responsibility really lies on the shoulders of the employer as well, because they are the ones making the ultimate decisions around skill mix changes and delivery of care and operations and all of that. In the long-term care sector, then we've got social development. That's kind of that in between with the New Brunswick Association of Nursing Homes, and all of our nursing homes are private entities. And what does that look like? They all have separate boards, and they all have different missions and values and visions. And, and the nurses within those long-term care facilities, they've been stripped away to a bare minimum over the years. Right. And it's been a sector that's been overlooked time after time. And everybody has a role on the team. Don't get me wrong. There's a healthcare team that needs to be in place for all residents in this province, whether you're in acute care or a long-term care setting. But stripping away the licensed staff, and I'm talking about both registered nurses and licensed practical nurses, especially in long-term care when the acuity of those residents has gone up over the last 30 years. I mean, I can remember going to a nursing home when people who lived in the nursing home drove to the nursing home. Right. And they were quite functional, and they were quite autonomous. That's no longer the case. The folks that are living in long-term care facilities are very complex, and they're coming with multiple comorbidities. And stripping away licensed staff that really has that knowledge, that breadth and the depth of knowledge to really care for them well has been like a sin here in New Brunswick, but we're not unique. We've seen that, and I think COVID really shone the light on the long-term care sector across Canada, and the fact that we've underfunded for so long. And these are the folks that have built our communities and our provinces and our country, and we're really not doing them a very good service.
I've always said that I've always said, like, whenever I'm talking about healthcare and education, I always say these are the ones that built it. These are the ones that are going to keep it moving. So
Absolutely.
this is where we need to make sure the proper funding is in place. I will retract some of what I said about the government because I have no problem saying when I am wrong, which is that you're right. It is, the CEOs, it's the people that are in charge that distribute out that funding to where it should go. What's important? Which brings me to the private staffing when they did the agencies with the public health, the delivery in the provinces. I gotta ask you because I never understood that. I never got that. So what is in the grand scheme of things, where are we at with that? And is that now gone completely?
So prior to February of 2022, New Brunswick never employed or had to employ a private for-profit agency nursing company. We were self-sufficient in New Brunswick. We were able to maintain, the right number of professionals to provide care. Fast forward to February 2022, we're in the middle of the pandemic. People are scrambling. A lot of nurses are leaving the profession, regardless if they're in New Brunswick or Canada-wide. There's a dire need. We have more than 1,200 vacancies here in the province.
Oh, wow.
People still need care. Every province in Canada is now employing private for-profit agency nurses and bringing them in to fill those holes. And basically what it is employers and governments sign contracts with a private company, obviously for profit, paying high hourly wages, right, to the company. Then in turn, the nurse that's being deployed is making sometimes 2, 3, and 4 times more than our nurses here in the province to do the job. But what we've recognized is that New Brunswick, like every other province, has its own nuances, right? And we're very unique. And sometimes just bringing somebody in because they have the right credentials is not always the best care. And we've heard the horror stories, that have happened with these private for-profit agency nurses. Now, the flip side of all this, and then we had the Auditor General do an investigation to find out just how much money of tax dollars was spent on these, and the conditions of the contracts, and come to find out that one of the contracts with CHL was a forever renewal, right? They didn't have to meet all these KPIs. They just got to renew. And this was the company that was signed on with Vitalité, our Francophone health authority. And come to find out, they weren't even providing Francophone speaking nurses in a lot of these communities. Now, fast forward to 2024, and Horizon said, we're getting to a point where we're trying to stabilize our workforce as best we can. We are going to stop using private for-profit agency nurses August 31st. It was huge. It was huge. We had nurses that were worried. They were scared that services were going to be closed down in their hospitals. But the flip side, and they were mad at me, right? But the flip side of it was, I kept saying, this is your hospital. This is your tax dollars. This is, what should be invested here in New Brunswick. It's not to be taken out of our communities and out of our province. What we need to do is take those dollars and invest them in you, the workers, and invest them in ways to get more people potentially to take nursing and healthcare, careers to help so that we stay here in our province. So Horizon did that, and it took some shuffling. We had to get some nurses to come from different areas of the province to fill in and provide services, especially in emergency and critical care areas. Now, Vitalité is still using a service, not CHL, it's a different one, but it's primarily being used in Campbellton, Bathurst, and a little bit in Moncton. I think Georges Dumont may be pretty well done with them, but in our northern sectors, right? Campbellton and Bathurst are still struggling to retain any nursing staff there or recruit. And it's been difficult, and I don't know if we're going to see our way out of that anytime soon.
What do you suppose the reason is for that? Why are we having such a hard time getting people? Like when we were kids, or at least I'll speak for me. When I was a kid, I can remember there being four or five people in my class that would be saying stuff. And we would always, you know how it was in the schoolyard, you talk about what you want to be when you grow up. I can remember people saying, oh, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a nurse, some I want to be a cop. But I can remember hearing people all say, I want to be a nurse when I grow up. What has I don't understand what has happened that people don't thrive on, the younger generation aren't thriving on this because I think that there's so much opportunity there.
Yeah. So I've got a couple of ideas. Now, these are my ideas and opinions. For our northern areas, we lost the schools of nursing in 1996 across the province. So it became a BN entry to practice to become a registered nurse in New Brunswick. So we lost 8 nursing schools scattered around the province. We were graduating sometimes between 500 and 800 nurses between the French and an English program out of these schools of nursing on top of the university programs. Some of these were, one of them was in Bathurst, which had a French and an English cohort. So if you were like me, you know, I went into nursing when I was 17 and after a week I quit. I went back when I was 24. And so I was a mature student. I was able to stay in my hometown of Bathurst, be able to go to school. That's where my home was. That's where my roots were already there. So it was a natural transition for me to graduate and go to work at the hospital. If I was to uproot and to go to Fredericton or to St. John or to Moncton, I'm making new friends. I'm potentially finding somebody that maybe I'm going to have a relationship with. I might buy a home down there and I'm going to have opportunities to work at different areas in the urban centers. I may not return back to my northern communities. So I think we're seeing some of that. We're also seeing less and less, how can I say this? People aren't having as many babies anymore, right? So our generation, right? Our generation is probably the last generation of, like, you see families of 3, 4, 5, and 6 children. We're seeing 1 or 2 children, or folks aren't having children today. So we don't have that uptick, especially to take care of the baby boomers, because that's what we're seeing in the system now is the baby boomers. So that's the post-war era. So to me, that's another issue. The other issue for our northern sectors, when I think about Bathurst, when I was growing up, it was a thriving community. It had the mill, it had the mines, there was a smelter, there was lots of industry, there was fishing. There's none of that anymore. There's fishing and there's a hospital and there's a government building, right? Outside of that, it's suffering. Camelton and Dalhousie, same thing. Dalhousie had a paper mill. They had a port there that they were doing exports, like major exports and imports coming in. They don't have that anymore. So it's hard to maintain a level of service with less people and less industry to be supportive of that. So you're not going to bring people to those areas if you don't have the service, but you don't have the service to then take care of them either. So it's that catch-22. So that's kind of my opinion on it. I don't know. I could be out in the potatoes, but I think it's, you know,
no, you
it
bring
could be
up a good
arguable.
point. A lot has changed. And you know, that is a very valid point. And when you don't have all those things that are thriving in your city, more people are likely to move or do something different. We're seeing it here in St. John. I know that my kids talk about moving to Ontario. One's in college and he's a carpenter and he's already saying, I might go to Ontario, Dad. And I'm like, I don't want you to leave. Well, there's not a lot, you know, I want to work. So
And
I
see,
get,
St. John, Moncton, Fredericton are our urban centers here in New Brunswick, right? Heavily populated. So when you come from the northern part of the province, you think, wow, the urban centers are the place to go. And so we're migrating down to the urban, but then your urban folks are looking for the greater, you know, the Ontarios, the Albertas, and the BCs. So
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's that continuous circle, I think.
It really is. So I do want to get in and talk about the Blair Doucet camp.
Sure.
But I do want to ask you one final question about what is a message that Paula Doucet would give to the next generation of young folks coming up that are thriving and want to get into nursing?
Nursing, I still say to this day, despite all of its challenges, is probably one of the best careers out there. There's not many careers that you can make a difference in somebody's life, a complete stranger, day in and day out. You see them at their best, you see them at their worst, but they look to you as a nurse to help guide them through some of the most difficult challenges of their lifetime. And it's not only the clinical aspect, but I haven't done patient care in 9 years, and I still feel like I make a difference every day because I'm advocate for the nurses I represent, but also advocating for, a publicly funded, a publicly delivered healthcare system that our New Brunswickers would be proud of. So there's lots of opportunities when it comes to nursing. It's not just the clinical practice side. So I say, absolutely, put your head down, get in the books, learn all that you can, and find a great mentor. And I think that's the key, is to find somebody who really loves what they're doing. I think nurses love their job. They just really don't like the conditions that they're doing it in.
Well, you know what, Paula, you do make a difference because, people hear you speak and they hear your passion and your voice. So believe me, you make a big difference, and I can feel your passion just listening to you talk.
Yeah, no, I love my career. I do.
Absolutely, you do. The origins to the Blair Doucet camp. Tell me when, where, and why it turned into what it is.
So, when my father's always been a huge proponent of education, and surprisingly, he didn't graduate from high school. He was grade 11 and he dropped out, and he lied about his age to get hired at the Brunswick mines at the time. But then he went back and he took his GED. So he got his graduation diploma, and he went on to become a certified pipe fitter. And he was a pipe fitter at the mines. So he always saw the value in education and got involved with his union at the mines with the steelworkers very early on in his career, but recognized that we're not taught anything in schools, right? And so when he was involved with the steelworkers, he was able to get himself and a few other men from the local to go into the high schools there to talk about health and safety. And so that's how it started. Then he started having conversations when he was a regional vice president around the executive council table of the Fed, saying, you know what, we should do this outreach to kids across the province. And so it took some time to convince folks to really see what his vision was. And so it was back in, it was in the early 90s, I think mid 90s maybe, whenever he really got folks on board and to run with this idea of a week-long school for kids, that they could learn about unions and social justice and the importance of their voice and their vote, but also have fun, right? And to bring them together from across the province. So it started that way. And I can remember he had this gray van that, he would truck the kids around in. There was no school bus. We didn't do school buses or anything. And there was folks like Terry Carter and Terry's wife Joyce and George Lehman and a few of them that said, you know what, let's do this. And they did it with I think 12 or 16 kids. And I think one of the first camps might be, if you ever have the opportunity to ask Denis Brun, he was part of one of the first camps, if not the first camp. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it started, and it evolved from there. And so it was not called the Blair Doucet Youth Summer Camp. It was just the Federation of Labor. And then sadly, my dad was diagnosed with multiple myeloma back in 2006. And in 2008, when he was battling his second bout of that, the Federation, under the guidance of Michel Boudreau as the president at the time, and the executive council, wanted to make the decision to name this camp in memory of my dad, even though he was still alive. He was, and so they had a ceremony in Bathurst at Danny's Hotel, where they changed the name of the camp and they gave him a plaque. And I can still remember to this day my father saying, they better not run that camp into the ground because it's in my name. So here we are all these years later. Sadly, my dad passed in, the year after in February. And, but here we are, doing our absolute best to keep this camp afloat. You mentioned about Chris, your co-host, and his participation in this camp. He's been a part of this camp as a chaperone for many years. We had our camp again this year, post-COVID. It was the first one since COVID. We had, I think, 19 kids. It was wonderful. The highest amount of kids we ever had was 32. I said I'd never do that again. That's way too many. Right? But I think, Nick, for me to see the transformation of these young children, right? And watch them grow in a week. Sounds weird, but they do grow in a week. They do form bonds and friendships that last a lifetime that otherwise I don't think they'd have the opportunity to do if it wasn't for this camp bringing them together. Because say, you know, a student from Tracadie who's predominantly French probably wouldn't have the opportunity to interact with a child from St. John who's predominantly English. But they come together at these camps, they form a bond, they have lifelong friendships. I've been part of the camp since 2010.
Okay.
And I still have kept in touch with youth that went in 2010. Right? Like I've watched them grow. I've watched them get married. I've watched them have babies. I've watched them take on their first job. And when they get a unionized job, it's amazing. They write to us. Guess what? I'm the new shop steward, or I took on the vice president role. And for me, that's like, wow, there's his vision. There's his dream still, you know, going on today. So yeah, I'm very proud of the thoughts that he had and the ideas and the work that it took to put it in play. But I'm also very happy for those that continue to value, you know, what this camp means and what this camp does for a select group of individuals, right? There's only, you know, 20 kids a year, but it's those 20 kids that can now make a difference in their workplaces. And they may not all become union, but they'll have a better understanding.
That's right.
Right. And they understand the reasons why it's important to be informed to make your vote. You know, we don't push one party or the other. You know, it's just about giving them the tools to be productive young adults when they come into the workforce.
So I'll tell you two really quick stories. Number one, I will say this. Wes Wills, who was one of the chaperones this year, when he came home, he called me. He said, it was the most incredible thing he'd ever done. He said, I can't wait. I'm doing it again. I said, really? It was that much fun. He goes, you have to come. Like, it was that great.
Yeah.
So, and then moving on, when God rest his soul, when Danny passed away and Chris had stepped into the interim role.
Yeah.
And he had, at that time, we had just really started getting, CUPE Talk was just starting to roll. And he said, can I talk to you about something I want to do? He said, I just want to bounce it off someone before I take it further. And I said, of course, tell me anything. And he said, Nick, I really want to get the Blair Doucet camp up and running again, full steam. And I said, yeah, it means a lot to you, doesn't it? And he said, Nick, it means everything to me. I really want this to be successful. And I just thought, like, of everything going on, and you were so concerned about the Blair Doucet camp, it just, to me, it spoke volumes because you were showing how much one person made a difference in your path, that you cared so much that you wanted to get something that meant a lot back up and running. And then to hear how successful it was and how much fun everyone had. You know, when COVID hit and the camp stopped, Paula, what was going through your mind? Were you worried that it may not get started up again? Like, what crossed your mind?
Yeah, so Danny and I started talking when they started lifting the restrictions, you know, post-COVID and stuff. And we said, like, how are we ever going to do this? Because we don't have that group that was previous campers to really, you know, share the knowledge of what happens at camp and get more kids involved. And people were still a little bit leery about letting their kids go, you know, to camp or to activities and whatnot. So we thought, okay, let's try a summit. Let's try like a weekend thing and we'll ease back into it. And we put a lot of work and planning and everything else into a summit, and we couldn't get it off the ground. We couldn't get I don't think the timing was right. And I was worried. I thought, oh my God, is this going to be the end of the camp? Like, this will be it, right? But we, the Executive Council of the Federation of Labor said, no, like, we have to do this in 2025. And we're going to, you know, we're going to bear down and we're going to, you know, really fan out the information through all of our affiliates. It was a struggle to get folks for chaperoning, right? Because you're giving up a week of your time.
That's
I
right.
mean, I was in the middle of bargaining, and I was like, I can't miss the camp, but I have got a bargain, right? I was really torn. So I had a backup. I had somebody backed up because if I got called back to the table, well, I had to leave. So no, I knew myself and Chris and Iris Lloyd.
Yep.
We've been at that camp for so many years, and I just knew between the three of us, we would give it our all to make sure that it was a good camp. And then we, with those extras that came in, and George, of course, George Lehman has been at camp since day one. I say he's the biggest kid at camp.
I'll second that.
Yes, absolutely. But like you said, Wes and there was Riley Hallahan and there was Lynn came and just people showed up. And until you experience it, you don't realize the impact that it has. Now, I missed dramatically a few people this year, and number one, Danny, obviously, because Danny always did the your vote counts. But Sebastian Bizot was a big part of this camp for many, many years. He works with an affiliate of PSAC, a component of PSAC, I think the justice component. So he was unable to get the time off. And I missed his presence because he's fabulous at the camp. So it takes a village of people. It takes, and Jody Delaire in the office for coordinating all the background stuff and getting all that going, and our bus driver, it takes a lot of folks. And I just knew everybody was all in this year to get this back up and running. So I'm confident that we're well on our way for a long planning and many years ahead for the Blair Doucet Youth Summer Camp.
Paula, it's not going anywhere. It was
I
a
hope
huge
not.
success. People were talking. People are still talking. It has been brought up on this show on more than one occasion. You know what? You should be very proud. The legacy that your father left, the legacy that you continue to write. Be very proud. The nurses are in good hands because they have someone like you leading the helm. And, I can't thank you enough for taking time to come here, sit down, and chat about all this. You are a true asset to the labor movement. I mean everything I'm saying to you right now, and I appreciate you so much.
I thank you, Nicholas, for your kind words. Like I say, this is who I am, right? This is what I do, and this is what I love. And I guess when you do something that you love, and that's so cliche, it doesn't become work. And this is me. This is authentic Paula.
I appreciate you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.